Okay, everybody, here we go. Good morning, good morning, good morning. How are we? Happy Friday for those of you who are not in the service industry and weekends mean nothing to you. Good morning. So happy to be here for another Astro-Babble. And so for those of you who are unfamiliar with the program, we're going to be taking 8 charts that have been donated by you, the lovely followers. We are currently going live on Instagram and Facebook. And we're just going to see what we see. We're going to take a peek at the charts that I've pulled up. For those of you on Facebook, you're going to actually be able to see the charts as I screen share them, so that's always fun. And if you're tuning live on Instagram or you would like to see previous episodes, feel free to visit the YouTube channel just by searching ScorpioRisingAstrology.com, which is my website at YouTube, and you'll be able to see all of the previous live streams as well as the weekly forecast that I do. That's pretty much it. We're going to pop open a fizzy water. Good morning, Alyssa. Good morning, everybody tuning in on Instagram, and we'll take a peek at these charts, shall we? Okay. And of course, everybody has to message me right as I go live. Good morning. Okay, first chart of the day is going to be Kevin. Kevin was born in Chicago. Let's take a peek at Kevin. So we've got a Gemini ascendant with Venus. Oh, that's Kevin. That's very interesting how you did that. I'm a fan of that. So Kevin has his Venus in Gemini, but the ruler of his chart, Mercury, is in Taurus, which means that Mercury and Venus have switched signs. That is called a mutual reception, and that's excellent. That's what we like to see, especially because Kevin's Mercury is in the 12th house of hidden enemies, which would technically make Mercury, the lord of the chart, detrimented or harmed because it's in that 12th house, a not so nice house. The moon in Capricorn is also applying to a trine with Mercury. Excellent, Kevin. You've remediated this. You've remediated the lord of your chart. Excellent, in a very, very good way. It's fascinating to me, though, because you've really decided to delve into this 12th house. You know, the 12th house is a scary house to a lot of people. It traditionally is associated with things like jails, hospitals, rehab, where we put ourselves away, lock ourselves away in order to transform, to cook, to heal. This is also the house of karmic healing. It's also a very transitional house. It's where we find a lot of therapy, both medical and metaphysical, happening. And to put the ruler of your chart here, especially Mercury, who tends to have a mental connotation as well as a planet, you know, I really would like to see you investigating some of the psychotherapeutic realms of your especially of your career, of your profession. Because we've got that Scorpio on the 6th, ruled by Mars in the 11th, of friendships. Like, you'd be really, really good at tapping into other people's junk. Especially with that Mars in Aries and then a moon in Capricorn, 2 very stern signs that are ruling your 8th house, that are in your 8th house of business, 6th house of work. As well as, you know, Venus in Gemini is a very... her words are graced, is a good way to say it. You know, Gemini is that very mental, intellectual, active, vocal sign, and then Venus is that lovely, abundant, graceful, soft, flowy, flower petally energy. And for you to have that Venus in Gemini in your first house in mutual reception with Mercury in Taurus, I just think that you being able to use your words to unlock people's healing processes is something that is just a natural talent for you. I also really enjoy kind of backing that up with the 3rd house of writing, teaching, communication being ruled by this exalted sun in Aries up in the 11th, flawless. Co-present with Mars in Aries, the ruler of the house, flawless. You've decided to be so charismatic, Kevin, with your words, with your personality. You really have a way of disarming people. Now, earlier in life, this probably backfired on you a little bit, because Mars in Aries and the Sun in Aries gives you this super competitive, very aggressive, masculine, hyper-focused, very potentially inflammatory or injurious as well, energy that if you didn't do sports as a kid, like, that anger would have been misdirected in 1,000 different ways, and I wouldn't be a fan of that early Kevin that had all of this fiery heat and he didn't know what to do with it. But as you started to grow and as you started to temper and as you started to really make your life your own and really understand how all of this 11th house friendship stuff really starts to become your own kind of magic bag of fairy dust, where you can just infect people with the fire of your personality. That's how we would use that therapeutically. But again, if that wasn't channeled appropriately in the beginning, then it was probably super, super difficult for you. Let's see. We have North Node in Libra in the 5th. Oh, Kevin. One of the things that I would highly suggest that you do is have children in your life. Not only because it's good for you and your development with this North Node in Libra in the 5th house of children, but also you have your Venus in Gemini in the 1st house ruling that North Node in Libra in the 5th, which really makes it like you'd be a great dad. You really would. And I'm saying that because of a couple different factors. One, the childhood that you had and the trauma that you experienced and the trauma that you help other people erase, you can then actively instill those gifts into the next generation, and I think that that's valuable for society. But then I also think that from a personal standpoint, you would grow tremendously as a father. Embodying that role would really activate this North Node, this kind of north of your personal compass in the 5th house of children, and I'm excited about that for you. However, relationship dynamics are a little bit tricky when it comes to the intimacy factor. The ruler of your 7th house of relationships is Jupiter in Capricorn in the 8th, so unless you're actively going into business with your spouse, it's going to bring up a lot of this not just toxic positivity, but this idea of somebody who comes into your life and they're not actually sure how broken they are. That Pluto tends to be rather toxic until you're 50. So unless we're looking at a later marriage, that Pluto and the detrimented Jupiter in Capricorn in the 8th, one of the ways that we would derail that kind of Pluto and Sag energy, which is a little bit poisonous when unfermented, would be a good way to say it, is jumping into business and actually using the catalyst of business practice to allow the fruition of a stable relationship when, if you were left to your own devices, you would kind of kill each other. Not literally, but you know what I mean. So that's an interesting relationship dynamic for sure. Everybody's messaging me. I get it. Okay. Gosh, you couldn't have messaged me before I went live. I should probably turn off the notifications on my phone. Anyway, so that's it, I think. Kevin, I think we've covered a lot in just a couple minutes. So chew on that. Let me know your feedback, and we'll talk. Lord have mercy on me. I'm gonna do not disturb my phone real quick. Okay, and here we go. So good morning, everybody. We are on to chart number 2. So we're going to talk about Daniel. Daniel, my dude. Let's take a peek. Okay, Daniel. So we're on chart number 2 with Daniel, and we've got the ascendant in Cancer with the moon in Leo in the 2nd of wealth. I enjoy this placement, one, because having Cancer on the ascendant and then having the moon in the 2nd house, one thing that people sleep on with Cancers when they talk about, Cancers being emotional and sappy, and that's all correct, but, Cancer is also a very fiscal sign. It does very well with money, from what I've seen. And putting your moon in Leo in the 2nd house of wealth, I think that this is, one, attaching your emotional state to your wealth. Also the idea of extravagant spending being a little bit in your detriment. However, there is a good appreciation and value of all things money in the chart. Despite I say that, and then I say that, Daniel, and then you've proven me wrong with some of these other aspects, and I'm not a fan of you doing that. Ooh, honey, Daniel, you got hit hard by this Venus retrograde, darling, because your Venus is naturally retrograde in Gemini, so you just had that, you had a double dose of that energy. Everybody's freaking out because the Venus retrograde, and you're like, welcome to my world. And it's in your 12th house of karmic healing. That's crazy. You've really decided that communication is going to be really hard for you. You know, that Mercury in Gemini being retrograde in the 12th house of hidden enemies, ruling your 3rd house of communication with the South Node present, all of these really tell me that speech and speaking is something that is very difficult for you. And I really hope that you're able to transform that throughout the life. However, there's a lot that needs to be unpacked there in the 12th house. We need to do some Mercury remediation for you. We may need to do some solar remediation. I think a lot of it has to do with confidence. I think a lot of it has to do with you putting value in external circumstance, whereas you really should be putting value on internal circumstance, because that moon in Leo in the 2nd is a very expressive and open moon. But a lot of your trials and tribulations are deep inside. And so if you're, looking at the rings and looking at the price tags and looking at the financial material value of things, but you're neglecting this idea of your own personal growth, of which there's a lot, especially in the mental, the speaking, the vocal realms. I think there's some serious stuff that needs to be unpacked there, Daniel. So we can always work on that one-on-one should you feel so called to do so. Because I think overall, you will be known as a teacher. I think overall you will be known for your 9th house topics of higher education, of travel, of working with foreigners, etc. Especially with, your North Node here in the 9th, and then Mars and Pisces here ruling the 10th of success. There is this idea of you specifically making strides in the 9th house topics that I just mentioned, and that being directly connected to your success. Jupiter in Taurus is also here, which is super interesting. Your friends are really fun. I like your friends. I enjoy your friends. Taurus friends specifically for you are excellent because they ground you. They remind you to stay grounded. But then also this Jupiter in Taurus, Jupiter makes things big. And so having your posse, having your entourage with a big protective bull-like personality, I think is absolutely excellent. It's a great choice for you. But then that Jupiter is ruling the 9th house and the 6th house. I know it's really tempting, like all you want to do is make friends in the workplace, Daniel. I know, honey. I know. But unfortunately, the workplace is not always the place that you make friends, especially because you've put Saturn and Uranus conjunct at 29 degrees in Sag, both retrograde in the 6th house of work, health, pets. There's this idea in your chart of work being restrictive and unpredictable. It's not an easy environment to make those intimate connections. You specifically decided that you would throw yourself into a crucible work-wise, and I'm not saying that that's a bad thing. I'm just saying that part of this whole journey with you is learning how to communicate your needs effectively, is learning how to understand what your truest talent and value is, not your superficial talent and value, but your real authentic talent and value, of which Taurus friends are more than happy to point out for you, because that's what they do best, is appreciate that authentic value. But then you're here managing all of this chaos and making sure that your work environment is stable and predictable, but by its very nature it is unstable and unpredictable. I think there's a lot of interesting back and forths that we could definitely unpack in your chart over the long term. Let's see, what else do we want to talk about? We want to talk about this Neptune in Capricorn retrograde in the 7th. It's an interesting placement, as well as having having Saturn ruling that Neptune from the 6th, I think you going into work with your spouse is definitely a thing. I think especially with your Cancer ascendant, your need and slight clinginess for love and affection is part of why that has to happen, because if you're doing your own thing in your work environment and you're not emotionally grounded by somebody who you know, like, and trust, then it can be somewhat difficult for you to survive in all of that chaos long term. Yeah, you've just really stacked a lot of very interesting things back to this pileup of Venus retrograde, Mercury retrograde, and the Sun in Gemini, all in the 12th house of healing, all in the signs of communication, 2 of them backwards. Like, I think we might need to work a little bit more one-on-one, exploring some of these details, working with some of these archetypes, potentially remediating them as we figure out the root of some of these tendencies, because it seems like you've spread your chart really thin, but at the same time you've focused in pockets, and that gives you this idea of being unfulfilled and adrift, but also on track, but only when you work on the stuff that you need to work on internally. Like, some people have categorized their chart as far as, I'm only going to work on career, I'm only going to work on relationships, I'm only going to work on family or wealth or friendships or things like that. And you've really decided that instead of working on all of these external factors, you need to work internally, but there are so many external factors that you're distracting yourself with, so we need to narrow those down a little bit. And unfortunately, we don't have time for that in these brief little snippets of readings. Okay, good morning, everybody. We are on chart number 3 with Nicole. My darling, how are you? Another ruler of the chart in the 2nd, that's fun. So Nicole has her ascendant in Virgo, and then her Mercury in Libra in the 2nd house, as well as being co-present with a fallen Mars in Libra, and then the Sun in Libra as well in the 2nd house. Lots of money stuff here, Nicole. You've really chosen that money, wealth, personal resources like time and energy are going to be a very, very big part of your experience. So I would highly suggest as well, you would be very good in the accounting world, although it would be a simultaneously difficult space for you to navigate in. You do have this flair for balance and eye for detail. I do think you would be able to make it work for sure. Even though that Mars is technically not as happy as it could be, there is this idea of you going into business, managing other people's money, and that being very tied to your chart as well. Oh, darling, an exalted Jupiter in the 11th house of friendships. I love it. What a bold choice, Nicole. When we have Jupiter in Cancer, that's the sign of his exaltation. He loves to be in Cancer. And to put that in the 11th house with no planets making a scuff about that, like, you've really, really done a great job at saying, when in doubt, Nicole, lean on your friends. This Jupiter in Cancer is so abundant, so caring, so nurturing. Like, your friends are absolutely everything. And in fact, you tend to attract friends in very high places, Nicole. Because that Jupiter in Cancer is ruled by the Moon in Gemini in the 10th of success. Like, I don't think you realize how connected you actually are. And I think that if you really needed it, your friends would be there just in a flash, and they would actually be able to bring some really impressive resources to the party in a way that you're simultaneously scared to tap into, but is also kind of part of your shtick. That's one of the things with having a ruler of the chart in the 2nd house, but also ruling the 10th, is you've decided to be kind of like a financial staple in a lot of people's lives. And being that financial staple and attracting friends who are naturally going to be very abundant and very wealthy with this Jupiter in Cancer in the 11th house, I think that you just kind of need to get used to this idea of financial resources being part of the game for you. What else do we want to talk about? Wouldn't surprise me if family traveled all the time, and or you had a foreign component to the family. We have this Venus in Sagittarius ruling the ninth house via Taurus. And whenever I see the fourth and the ninth house connected, there's always this idea of family living abroad, the constant traveling, very spiritual practices being involved, a very cultured family, or parents kind of marrying into a foreign culture. And that being part of the early family dynamic. Let's look at 7th house relationships. Oh, 7th house relationships ruled by that exalted Jupiter. Girl, don't worry about it. Your partner is going to be fine. Fine. Little emotional, but great. Absolutely great. No complaints in the partner department. Having an exalted planet ruling your 7th house with no detrimental aspects. Mwah, I love it. If only everybody could be so lucky. Working with children, childcare, parenting, that would also be an excellent way for you to make a living. Not necessarily how you would make your oh no, I see the plan is unfolding, Nicole. So this idea of your 6th house in Aquarius with the North Node being ruled by Saturn in Capricorn, another planet in its appropriate place in the 5th house of children. 5th house, 6th house connections is often working with children, and then you have this 4th house Venus ruling your 2nd house of finance. So you working with family dynamics, working in family businesses, working with children, working around parents, that kind of aspect I think would be absolutely flawless with you. Like you doing the books for daycares, or you being a financial director of a maternity ward. Like all of these things would be excellent for you, just because these associations with family and children very, very present in your house. Like you'd be an excellent doula. All of these things. Where else do we want to go in your chart, Nicole? No, I think that's pretty much about it. Cool. Thank you, Nicole. I appreciate you donating your chart to science. Let's take a peek. Good morning, Asvini. Good morning, everybody who's jumping on. We are on chart number 4, which is Bibita on Instagram. Let's take a peek. Okay. Whoa, girl. Slow down. Slow down, my dear. Goodness gracious. So Cancer ascendant with a stellium, an absolute stellium in Sagittarius in the 6th house, including the ruler of the chart, the moon. So in the 6th house, let me rattle them off for you. We've got Pluto, we've got the moon, we've got Jupiter, we've got Venus, and we've got Mars. Venus and Mars are conjunct. The moon is 1 degree and Pluto is at 0 degrees, so they are technically conjunct by less than a degree in the 6th house of work. Girl, you are such a workaholic. I can't even with you. So when we look at your chart specifically, my dear Bibita, the crazy emphasis of the 6th house of work, health, pets is a massive thing for you. We also have Jupiter in Sag here in his own domicile. Get over it. Man, you've put so much emphasis on the 6th house. Absolutely crazy. Absolutely crazy. You could do so many things with this. You could work with horses, especially with Sagittarius in the 6th and Jupiter in the 6th ruling that. Horse medicine would actually be absolutely flawless for you. Not just because the 6th house is the house of health and pets, but also because of the Sagittarius influence, often having horse themes. That Jupiter is also ruling the 9th. You'd be an excellent teacher as well at the college level. Saturn at 17 degrees in Pisces in that house as well. MC making a trine to nothing exactly. Okay. Just looking through aspects real quick. But then, as we unpack this 6th house of work, health, pets, which is absolutely massive, and directs so much of the chart, we also have this cazimi of the Sun and Mercury conjoined at 29 degrees right on the cusp of Scorpio in the 5th house of family, parenting, sexuality, creativity. It wouldn't surprise me as well if you have high, like, as I look at your chart, when we see Mars and Venus conjoining in a medical house, and then we see Scorpio, the sign of sexuality, with a cazimi with Mercury, who is known to be androgynous. I think the idea of gender issues also going to be very, very prominent in your chart. It wouldn't surprise me also if you worked with the transgender community, specifically from a medical perspective, because again, that Mars and Sag conjunct Venus ruling the Mercury cazimi in the 5th house of sexuality, that would be a potential thing. Like, we go from you breeding horses to you working with the transgender community. Like, there's a wide spectrum here, but it all involves this 5th house of children, parenting, sexuality, 6th house of work, health, pets, and all of this focus just combined on these 2 houses, absolutely massive, paired with your Cancer ascendant, which just gives you that bleeding heart like nobody's business. So much interesting energy in your chart, but that's really what we keep coming back to. Yeah. Wouldn't surprise me if a lot of the work you did from home or in other people's homes, with the North Node in Libra being ruled by that Venus and Sag in the 6th. But then also, like, a lot of your life purpose this time around is to develop a family, is to work with the 4th house of family and home, and really understands that you give so much to other people, you give so much of yourself, that you need to have a root, you need to have a base, you need to have a sense of security, you need to have a stability that you come home to at the end of the day, because your chart is so hyper-focused in these areas, so good at these certain areas, like the fame component, zero question, of you being very, very good at what you do. However, just this idea of you needing to nourish this North Node in the 4th and really make sure that your home is sacred space, that the minute you walk through that threshold, you leave everything that you did during the day behind, and that being a very personal part of your chart. 7th house, we have Uranus and Neptune in Capricorn, ruled by Saturn in Pisces, who is stationed up in the 9th. That's a slight mutual reception, a secondary mutual reception between Neptune and Saturn, if we're looking at secondary rulers. So I think that the 7th house of relationships and the 9th house of spirituality, travel, foreigners, higher education is definitely connected. Your spouse may be involved in any of those topics, or maybe a foreigner and or long distance relationship from that perspective. But there is a connection between 7th house of relationships and the 9th house of travel, foreigners, higher education, spirituality. Let's see, where else do we want to go from here, my dear? Nope, I think that's pretty much it. That stellium in the 6th just takes up so much of the chart. It's absolutely ridiculous how much energy is packed into that one house, with the natural ruler, Jupiter, with the chart ruler, the moon. There's just so much power there, and we could definitely work with that a little bit more one-on-one, but I think that that's kind of the crux of the chart, is the 6th house of work, health, pets. Awesome. So it is the 4th chart. We are halfway through the live stream. Let's just take a quick break and say if you would like to be a part of the live stream, if you, your friends, your family, your pets, we've had pets on the live stream, we've had children on the live stream, anybody who can give consent. We just need their birth date, place, exact birth time. You can private message me those details. I will add them to the list. The list is rather long, so please be patient, but I will message you when your chart is featured. We do 8 every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, as well as if you would like to learn astrology, or if you would like to work one-on-one with me privately, you can always go to my website, which is scorpiorisingastrology.com. Okay. Let's move on to chart number 5, which is Iris. Hello, dear. How are you? We have a Taurus ascendant. Oh. Ooh, girl. Ooh, girl. Iris. We need to have a conversation. The ruler of your chart is Venus. She's in the 7th house of relationships. She's also in Scorpio, the sign of her fall, 1 degree away from Uranus in Scorpio. We also have Mercury retrograde in Scorpio in the 7th house as well. This makes your relationships very, very muddy. Extremely muddy. It also means that you tend to play the victim in your relationships, and your relationships tend to be rather secretive, chaotic, unpredictable, and dark. And you're attracted to the bad, not bad people, but like the bad boy, the bad girl. You know, it's that leather jacket, mohawk, tattoos, I've got a pass kind of energy in the 7th house for you, my dear. And we would definitely need to do some Venus remediation for your chart to make sure that does not get the better of you, because that Venus is also connected to your 6th house of work, where Saturn is conjoining your sun. Lord, have mercy on you. Goodness, you know, and this is when, like, when I say that certain charts specifically make it difficult, this is what I mean. Like, having the ruler of your chart in the 6th house conjunct Saturn, who is exalted, technically, you know, but it's still Saturn in the 6th. Jupiter's in the 6th, Pluto's in the 6th, and then to pack your 7th house with all this stuff, like, it seems like you've gone out of your way to really do some very intense work this go around. And I'm not necessarily a fan of how you've decided to layer and leverage your planetary scheme, because it just seems like it's super hard on you. And unless you have the tools in order to navigate that, especially that 7th house, it can feel like you're trudging through a swamp, like you're just stuck in this deep, oily, dark mud of a relationship. And, you know, on the higher expression, it can be so fulfilling to have somebody who's spiritually connected and deeply intimate, and who almost speaks a foreign language with you that only you two know. And it can be so thrilling and exciting and deep and just amazing. However, just the idea of the 7th house being so stacked against you, we would definitely need to work with that on a more spiritual and planetary magic level to get some ritual remediation in. Work, however, being tied to that as well, you know, it wouldn't surprise me if you end up working with your spouse, and again, some of the relationship stuff trickles into the work stuff. It gets messy because of that. Saturn comes in and starts to restrict the light of the sun, who's already starting to wane anyway. There's just a lot. And when in doubt, you detach. You know, this moon in Aquarius in the 10th, I really think that it's actually one of the saving graces of your chart, especially because the moon is squaring that Mercury pretty damn hard by degree, just a couple seconds separate. You know, the moon in the 10th is just like, you know what, I'm literally just going to turn off my human switch and I'm going to be a robot. Yeah, that's what I've decided. I'm going to be robot Iris. And that's, like, I think for everything that you've gone through, I think that that's a valid choice. I think that defense mechanism can always be detrimental over time, but your need for distance and your need to be emotionally separate from these topics, I think works in your favor. It also, like, you having the exalted Saturn in Libra ruling your moon in the 10th, I think that there is a chance that you would be very, very good in the medical field, working with fuzzy little creatures, as well as just in your day-to-day work. You do have some markers for success because you are able to turn off your personal life. And I think working with that apathy is going to be actually a really strong move for you, for sure. We just need to make sure that we don't completely neglect the work just because you don't feel it doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. So there's that. We can't I'm reminded of the scene in The Magicians where they bottle their emotions literally, but then when they unbottle their emotions, it comes back twice as strong, and they kind of are flooded with everything that they repressed. And that's very much the not so fun aspect of that part of your chart. We do have this this Mars and Leo in the 4th, which is, I think, really good for you. The Mars and Leo in the 4th is that family dynamic that always encouraged you to push forward. You know, when in doubt, flick your hair back and just strut down the runway like you own it. And I think that that's also a valid strategy. It also comes with a certain amount of emotional detachment, and that Mars and Leo in the 4th of family, like the idea of you claiming that power and being told that you're beautiful, you're brilliant. Don't let anybody get you down. I think that's very, very valid. Even though it can be a lie, it is a useful lie, and I think that that's one of the things that your chart keeps hammering over and over again, is this idea of strategic untruths being necessary to navigate some of your life experiences, but also because you trade in lies and secrets, you also need to be able to trade them out for truths and realizations. Yeah. So there is this light and dark aspect that we need to unpack a little bit in your chart as we start to move forward, and the Sun and Saturn combination starts to mature in the 6th house. You get better at work. You really start to be able to master your apathy in a way that creates this rational ability for you to wander through life unencumbered, but also, you know, feel the feelings that are associated with this Taurus Moon combo. And this Venus in Scorpio, there's just multiple dynamics going on that I think are super strong, and you being able to weasel your way out of it through apathy, detachment, and untruths being a valid strategy, but also a dangerous one if you don't play them correctly. Does that make sense? Okay. Cool. Thank you, Jenna. I appreciate it. That's such a nice thing for you to say. Let's go to Allison. Allison, where are you? Good morning. Let's take a peek. Another Cancer Ascendant. Theme of the morning. With an Aquarius moon. Okay, let's take a peek. Where are we going in this chart? Oh, Sun and Leo in the 2nd. I like that. I like that a lot. Okay, so we've got some serious entrepreneurship tendencies with Allison. You know, having that ascendant in Cancer ruled by the moon in Aquarius in the 8th, that's automatically going to put the heart in the business house. And then we have the Sun in Leo in the financial house, which is really this like super independent, fiery financial side that I'm a fan of. I like that a lot. Mercury in Cancer tends to make the words rather emotional, tends to make great for motivational speaking, especially with that Mercury in Cancer tide ruling the 3rd house of writing, teaching, communication. Well, we've got Venus in Virgo here. Venus is actually in her fall, or her detriment in Virgo. She doesn't like to be in Virgo, so Allison, I need to make sure that you're not censoring your words. It's one thing to make your words pretty. It's one thing to make them flourished. Like calligraphy would be excellent for you, the literal beauty of writing and speaking. But if you try to dress up your words a little bit too much, they become inauthentic. Yeah? Your words cannot have bits and bobbles and dangly earrings and be coated in glitter and have a grill and all of that. Like, it's not helpful. The message needs to speak for itself, Allison. You need to use your words for what they are, and put the emotion behind them, as opposed to just kind of dressing them up. Don't censor them either. Your words need to be raw and authentic, which is something that Venus in Virgo absolutely hates, because she prefers to be all prim and proper and nice. So what if you have a spelling error, Allison? So damn what? You're human. And I think that you have the strength to overcome that really, really strongly. But just as a reminder, you know, for those of you in the back, that's part of the chart dynamic for sure. Jupiter and Scorpio in the 5th, Pluto and Scorpio in the 5th, North Node in the 5th, ruled by Mars and Gemini in the 12th. Ooh, interesting. The Lord of the health house in Scorpio in the 5th. Yeah, okay, so we need to talk about reproductive stuff, Allison, from a health perspective. It's going to be very tied to diet, just FYI. But the idea of Jupiter ruling your 6th house of health in the 5th house of sexuality, but then also Mars in Gemini in the 12th house of hospitalizations, another health house ruling your 5th house via Scorpio, North Node and Pluto in Scorpio here as well. I think there's a lot that you need to be learning in the reproductive department, in the sexuality department, and the childbearing department for you specifically. Jupiter tends to make things big anyway, so it wouldn't surprise me if we have some PCOS stuff going on, if we have an enlarged uterus, if we have a lot of medical things that need to be taken into account in the chart that are exacerbated by diet, with that Mercury in Cancer, ascendant in Cancer, ruling the stomach. Yeah, so that's just something to be aware of. North Node in Scorpio, ruled by Mars in Gemini in the 12th. You'd also be an excellent doula, because of that Jupiter influence and that Mars connection. Like, I'm really seeing a lot of and Mars in Gemini is ruling your 10th house. You should totally be a doula, girl. This medical reproductive stuff in your chart is giving me life. I'm so here for it. But I think that this tendency, has to be rooted in your own physical experience. I think the toxicity of these like really heavy Scorpio placements, this Jupiter that's just blowing up all of that muck that Scorpio tends to accumulate, medically in the bowels, the sinus, the bladder, the reproductive area, but then also Mars ruling your 5th house of reproduction, your 10th house of success from your 12th house of hospitalizations. Like, you've got this really strong connection, and Mercury in your 1st house ruling the 12th house in Gemini. Yeah, honey. You need to be working with the reproductive arts, is a good way to say it. The mysteries of life and death are definitely within your purview, and I would highly suggest, especially if you feel like if you're not digging deep enough into your life's purpose, if you're not biting into the flesh of what you feel your destiny is, go deep, go dark, go shamanistic, go into that kind of childbearing space and really investigate the womb, the tomb, and really create that shamanic connection to the doulaship. And that'll also help to remediate the Venus in Virgo, who really just tries to make the words too nice, who really just tries to be the perfectionist, the Barbie archetype. One of the things when I work with people who have a Venus in detriment is Venus often comes forward during the session, and she just takes a clump of dirt and smears it across her face, and she's just like, I am dirty, I am of the earth. Like, nothing is truly dirty, and everything is beautiful. And I think that you investigating those more medical mysteries, which a lot of people view as very dirty, very Scorpio, very secretive, underworld, forbidden, hidden, dark, mysterious, that like you have a unique quality to bring light to that situation and make great money from it. But money really isn't an issue with that Sun in Leo in the 2nd now, is it? Okay, I think that's it. The chart went cold. Cool. So, Allison, I hope that you enjoyed that. Thank you so much for listening. We've got one more chart to do, and we're actually going really good. Cool. So we've got one more chart, and then we will wrap up probably just a little bit. Oh no, we have 2 charts. Just kidding. So I'm right on time. Now we need to talk about Melody. Melody, my dear. Another Cancer ascendant, this time South Node on Cancer. Ooh, and we've got a Capricorn pile up. Oh, that's fun. Where is the moon? Oh, the moon is exalted in Taurus. Oh, honey, Melody. Melody. I'm a fan. So when we look at the 1st house, that Cancer ascendant makes you naturally sensitive. Like, yes, we'll get to your cold, stern, business-oriented Capricorn side, although you prefer to put that power into your spouse, and we'll We'll definitely talk about that in a second. But the idea of you putting the ruler of your chart, this moon in Taurus in the 11th, like, I cannot emphasize this enough. The idea of you specifically needing to be surrounded by friends and material comforts. Like, I just see you and your friends getting together at like a hookah lounge or one of each other's houses and just like getting on the couch with all these comfortable blankets and these scented candles and this food and like a fondue pot and like just you kikiing around with all of the sensory delights that a Taurus moon just absolutely relishes. And to have that moon placed in your 11th house of friendships, absolutely gorgeous, darling. Absolutely gorgeous. So I think that's one thing to understand. Any client who comes to me and they have a Taurus moon, you know, the best way to hack your emotions is to go for the physical pleasures, right? And we really need to understand that you taking a bubble bath with smelly bath salts and a glass of wine and good music and, you know, having a face mask on, like, that's all your Taurus moon craves, right? So that's just Melody's Hacks 101. Embrace the Taurus moon, especially when friends are present. And I see your comment about no partner, by the way. So we're specifically talking about friends at this point. But on that note, since you're so inclined, let's talk about this Capricorn nonsense that you've decided to put into your 7th house of relationships. So we have Venus in Capricorn, Mercury in Capricorn, North Node in Capricorn, Jupiter in Capricorn, and the Sun in Capricorn. That's a lot, honey. And Saturn is over here in the 12th house in Gemini retrograde. Jesus. Which puts a mutual reception between Mercury and Saturn. You know, one of the things that you need to understand about a potential mate is that you are going to be a very large part of their recovery process, both physically and metaphysically. I think that putting the ruler of your 7th house retrograde in the 12th house of hidden enemies is definitely a choice. But the 12th house is also the house of karmic healing. You know, you're attracted to that damage. You're attracted to somebody who's ready to open their mind and make that next step, but you are constantly the one who feels like you have to pull them out of their own funk. And that can be really tiring, darling. That can be really, really difficult. So I embrace that. I understand that. Like, I get it. But at the same time, don't... Like, that's a lot of responsibility. That's a lot of responsibility. And I worry for you just because, you know, you've put your North Node here. It's something that you're supposed to be learning, how to have a stable relationship, how to be in a partnership that's actually effective, mind you, not just for them, but for you as well. You know, all of this Capricorn energy, you're looking for a rock. You're looking for somebody who's stable. You're looking for somebody who's driven, for somebody who has all those Capricorn tendencies where it's like they're, you know, they know what they want from the world and they might be slow to get it, but they're going to get it. They're going to get to the top of the mountain. But the way that they do it is through habits, patterns, and routines, and by saying no before they say yes, and being a little bit frigid and cold and all that jazz. But you know, it's not all about you fixing them. You know, it also is about them providing stability for you specifically. So that's part of the dynamic that I really think that we need to be a little bit more embracing of. Is there's a tendency for the 7th house to be at a disadvantage because of the Saturn in Gemini retrograde in the 12th. So just taking it one step at a time and really making sure that you're listening for those key words of somebody who's habit forming, somebody whose daily structure is regimented, somebody who's going places, somebody who is achievement oriented, somebody who is goal oriented, somebody who recognizes their damage but is working on it, preferably somebody who's already in therapy. If they balk at the idea of therapy or spiritual development, screw them. Don't take a part in it because they don't acknowledge their own damage. And when I say that you attract people who are damaged, I'm saying that that's part of the dynamic, because you've decided that in order to heal your 7th house, in order to learn that lesson, you really need to be with somebody who is broken in that space. right? So that's kind of the trade-off, is they can be very stable, but their healing process is what makes them stable. They're unsteady, therefore they stabilize, which makes them a good place for you to rest and nest on. Yeah. However, if they don't acknowledge their own shit, then they could be a volcano that's about to blow at any moment, and we don't want that. Also, you potentially going into business with a partner. That's fun. We have the 6th house of Sag being ruled by the Jupiter in Cap from the 7th. So somebody who's willing to invest or partner or potentially speak on your behalf, that's going to be a good thing. A good business partner is also something that you would potentially look for in a relationship. And also, like, you working with couples as well. You know, this Mars and Sag, Neptune and Sag in the 6th of work being ruled by Jupiter and Capricorn in the 7th really does speak towards you providing inspiration and couples counseling to people who find themselves in detriment, because that Jupiter is definitely in detriment. So I would encourage maybe do a little bit more couple work. If you know, I see in the comments that you're a healer. I think that it's important for you to maybe delve into the couple space, delve into the relationship space, and actually work on you learning about relationships through helping other people heal theirs. That would be a strategic move for you. Oh, and also you'd be really good at hosting retreats for that purpose. Like, couples retreat is loosely based on your life. Okay, let's move on to our very last chart, which is Ariana. Ariana, my darling, let's take a peek. Okay, so we're going to be that way, huh? I guess we're going to be that way. Fine. Fine, Ariana. Fine. Let's do this. So, we have a Virgo ascendant. Makes you naturally very picky. Makes you naturally very detail-oriented. Especially with Mars and Venus here, it really does bring the... It really does bring the nuances to the surface in your mind. It makes you extremely hyper-focused on things that other people are not hyper-focused on, which is why when you read for Libra, you're like, oh, that really doesn't make sense to me. No, we have this kind of neuroses of Virgo that's coming through in your 1st house of self as well. And then we have a mutual reception between Mars and Mercury. We have Pluto, the Moon, Mercury, South Node, and Saturn all in the 3rd house of writing, teaching, communication. Mercury and Mars have traded signs, meaning that they are intimately connected. And I really enjoy that. I think that for you specifically, if you're not writing, teaching, speaking, you're doing yourself a great disservice, especially at the college level. I would really, really like you to take some of your 3rd house qualities of, again, writing, teaching, speaking, and pole vault them into the North Node in Taurus, ruled by this Venus in Virgo in the 1st. That chemistry of you teaching at the college level and using your not just Moon and Scorpio, but that mutual reception between Mars and Mercury to really do some interesting things in the teaching space. Like, you'd make a great English teacher, but you'd also do very well working in realms of fantasy, and helping people to, like, with all this Scorpio energy in your 3rd house, you'd be a great horror writer. You'd be a great, Scorpio also rules sexuality, so the sexual component, like murder mystery type stuff, would be right up your alley from a writing, teaching, speaking perspective. I love that idea for you specifically, especially with Saturn ruling both your 5th house of creativity and your 6th house of work from the 3rd house of writing, teaching, speaking. It would be absolutely excellent for you to delve into those fields. You tend to be a little bit too, and this is where we get back to this Venus specifically and this Mars, both in Virgo, Venus also ruling the Sun in Libra in the 2nd house of finance. You know, I think that your pickiness and I think that your attention to detail is probably one of the greatest weaknesses of your chart, Ariana. And when I say that, I just mean that, and this is something that a lot of my heavily placed Virgo clients will kind of attest to, the idea that the details often annoy people. The details often compromise communication. The details often, in social settings, when you're not trying to share a story, yeah, people are like, shut up, give me the Cliff Notes version. I don't have time for your long-winded explanations of why things need to be done a certain way, because all we're talking about is doing the chores. Yeah. So I think with you specifically, having this Venus and Virgo ruling your second house, being extra picky about money is definitely going to be a thing. Your money is also tied to your ego, so the idea of you specifically having the second house of finance, your sun placement here, that ego, that radiance, your feeling of your inner light being diminished if finances are not doing well, and likewise being bolstered or somewhat egocentric if finance is doing well. That Venus and Virgo can come across as that Barbie archetype, where it's like, okay, so you got your nails did, you're wearing the latest fashion, your makeup's done, your hair's done, you're looking fierce and fresh, but the ego is compromised because you've put on layers of superficiality and detail that don't truly nourish who you are as a person. Yeah. Instead, what truly nourishes your soul, your spirit, your essence is going to be this writing, teaching, speaking gig. This stuff where you start to share these stories, share these experiences, share this underbelly of your world, this kind of dark side of the mind that really is very niche and hyper creative, but in a very kind of dark and stormy night way, for sure. Then there's the idea that you use work to escape from family dynamics, and that's fine. Like, I don't fault you for that. I think that that's normal. But having Jupiter ruling your seventh house of relationships from the sixth, like, you try to escape, but then at the same time there's this constant pull back because you have a tendency of weaving your relationships into your work. One thing that I'm just kind of noticing, because again, I don't look at these charts beforehand, but this Pluto Moon conjunction at 4 degrees, the Moon is conjoined Pluto in the third house as well. So again, like, super emphasis on the dark and stormy night archetype. Like, your whole aesthetic should be gothic and dark and very H.P. Lovecraft, and just really venomous writing that I think would be excellent for you. Like, we want the monster story, we want the Frankenstein, like, we want all of these deeper scorpionic themes to be coming through in your writing process. Otherwise, we're not going to get the brunt of you. If you try to evoke that Venus and Virgo and you try to be too polished, people are going to see right through it, and they're like, this is a shell, I don't like it. This isn't Ariana's true self, this isn't her writing, and they're just going to throw it out the window. So yeah, I think that's pretty much about it. Cool. Thank you, my dear, for donating your chart to science. Thank you, everybody. I appreciate it. Thank you. Yes, so everybody's tuning in at the last minute on Facebook. If you would like to be in the live stream, all you need to do is private message me your birth date, place, and exact birth time. Also, friends, family, children, pets, we've had them all on the live stream. All I need is consent. Do not give me people's birth information without their consent. That's a spiritual violation of privacy. But then also, we do this Monday, Wednesday, Friday. You can look at the YouTube channel for previous live streams. If you've enjoyed this, just search ScorpioRisingAstrology.com on YouTube. My channel will pop right up. Thanks. Thank you so much. I appreciate you, Brother Lightheart. Love, love, love. And yes, and then if you'd like to work with me one-on-one, you can always go to my website, ScorpioRisingAstrology.com. I've got astrology classes on there, too. I've got an astrology bundle, which is just 4 of my Astrology 101 classes on planets, aspects, houses, and signs for $85, which you can digitally download. But then also, like, stay tuned. Talk to me. Read the daily forecast that I do on Insta and Facebook. and then watch the weekly forecast that I do on the YouTube channel, which is starting to take traction. I just love this. This is the Astro-Babble for a reason. We're just kind of talking about the stars and addressing things as they come up. So thank you all for joining me. I'm going to sign off until next time. But until next time, until Monday when we resume the babble, may the stars be ever in your favor.